another medical doctor that had lymphoma, but it wasn't just normal lymphoma. What type of lymphoma was it?
It was called mantle cell lymphoma, which is one of the most aggressive and dangerous of all cancers.
And tell me about Dr. Tom Renfro.
Well, Dr. Renfro was diagnosed with it and was told that there is no medical cure for it, that there's no remedy. And he began to pray for healing, and it took forever to come. His disease progressed and progressed.
You know what I can't believe, Linda? His wife was so sure that they would be healed that she videotaped his body just destroying itself. I mean, and they got to the point where they had to cover up the windows, and she had to stop videotaping because he went down to nothing, no hope. Let's take a look at this footage. You know, there is no logical, rational explanation for this man to be healed today, except there is a God in heaven that answers prayer. But he had a key. Part of his healing, and this is a very important key, which Linda points out in the book, is obedience. He heard from God to have one treatment, a chemotherapy. But that made no sense to the natural mind because, Linda, he was going to die. Well, if he had the chemo, what did the doctors tell him?
They told him he would probably die just from the chemo because his body wasn't strong enough to combat it. And they really didn't want to do it. But God had told him to do this. And so they took him by ambulance. He was too sick at this point to go in a car. They took him by ambulance to the hospital and agreed to start the chemotherapy.
Well, let's take a look at it right now.
I was diagnosed with mantle cell lymphoma. It's one of the rare forms of lymphoma, and unfortunately, the doctors told me at the time there was no cure, that radiation wouldn't cure this, that bone marrow transplants and stem cell harvesting techniques have been tried and failed with this particular brand of lymphoma. That chemotherapy, it may knock it back a little bit, but it would march right through as you progress through your chemotherapy. It would just come right back.
To your knowledge, has anyone ever been healed of this type of lymphoma?
To my knowledge, no.
Well, I mean, now you're a doctor. You know more than most people.
Right.
Did you, in your wildest imagination, ever think you'd get cancer?
No. One of the greatest fears that I had when I was in medical school, and you know, you see a lot of different diseases. One was either leukemia or lymphoma, because I saw a lot of people suffering through that disease. And inside of me, there was a fear, Lord, don't ever let this occur in my life. And look what the devil brought. He brought right lymphoma to me.
You told me earlier you had another fear of chemotherapy.
Right.
Why?
Chemotherapy, and don't get me wrong, don't misinterpret what I'm saying, but it is something designed to kill. And it has such horrendous side effects. I didn't know if I would be able to withstand any of the side effects of chemotherapy. And to me, I didn't want to go that route. I didn't want to have that in my body.
Now, Tom, as I understand it, you decided to approach this as if it was a war.
Yes.
I mean, you were giving no ground to this disease, but the more you were giving no ground, the more it was spreading. So didn't
Right.
you reach a point of discouragement?
There was a point of discouragement, and it came when I was so sick, and that is when that spirit of discouragement came upon me and says, why don't you just give up? Why don't you let go of this notion that God's going to do anything for you?
But wouldn't it be easier to give up? I mean, I'm sure the thought came, it's easier to give up than to fight.
That's right. It is. Sometimes you get so tired you just want to quit. That what is the use? But that's where the Word and God's Spirit just starts quickening within us and gives us more hope and gives us that ability to press on one more time.
Now, when Sid covered up the mirrors and decided you can't even look at yourself, you must have known you knew how bad off you were and you were getting worse progressively.
I didn't want to look at myself. And I wanted to maintain an image of wholeness and completeness in my body. I didn't want to look at myself and look at how sick I was. I never did look at myself as sick. I never did perceive myself as what they had to look at.